this 7-5 record, man. This is very surprising at this point in the season. Now, based off of what all has transpired in the season, what has transpired with the roster, and just the unpredictability of the NFL as a whole. If you were to ask me to bet a large amount of money going into this season that the Colts would be 7-5, holding the sixth place wild card spot, or the number 2 wild card spot, sixth place overall in the AFC, with only having Anthony Richardson playing for the most part 4 total games in terms of quarters played, there's no way I'm taking that bet, if I'm being absolutely honest with you. But here we are, after a amazing, thrilling overtime victory over the Titans, completing the season sweep for the first time since 2018, going into Cincinnati at 7-5, and we are right now controlling our own fate, JB.
Man, it's quite an interesting spot to be in, and I, like you said at the beginning of the season, I don't think we really saw ourselves here. I mean, I think we knew this team had potential, but I don't think any of us really had high expectations. So to be squarely in the playoff hunt this time of the year is a great spot to be in. And I think we've touched on it the last several weeks with Cole, but we saw a path a few weeks ago. After that Patriots game, you could start to see things take shape. Like if they kept playing a little bit better with Minshew, a little bit more consistency, there's a chance this team could make a run, and the already easy schedule continues to get easier. I mean, that being said, I guess the Bengals looked very good against the Jaguars, but Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett goes down. They're on a backup quarterback. The Jaguars aren't a backup quarterback. I know we don't play them again, but it still has impact on our playoff seeding and how that all goes. So the AFC right now is a complete logjam mess, and there's a bunch of backup quarterbacks, and I'm frankly extremely excited that we have the best one, in my opinion, of all the backups. So it's a great spot to be in, and it's enjoyable watching Colts football in November and December, and that's the first time we can say that in a long time.
It's definitely been 2-3 years since there's been a legitimate playoff vibe here in Indy. And on top of the Colts doing so well, I mean, shoot, you look at the Pacers, who are in the in-season tournament right now. They're in the finals playing the Lakers tomorrow night. You've got both Purdue and IU basketball playing well. It's a good time to be a sports fan in the state of Indiana. But in terms of Colts football overall, we are starting to get performances from players and step-ups from players that, honestly, we've been dogging on most of the season, quite frankly. And I mean, first and foremost, I have to just start off with Alec Pierce. He only had 3 catches, but my God, all 3 of them were huge. I mean, the first one being the long bomb touchdown, and then the last one being a long bomb to set us up at the 4-yard line for that basically out and in route to Pittman for the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're exactly right. There was no other way to start this episode other than to give props to Pierce, because we've been harping on his lack of production for 12 weeks or whatever it's been, and he showed up. Like you said, it's only 3 catches, but he made it a huge impact on this game. And I don't know if you recall, but our listeners might. I mean, when I talked about the Titans the first time around when we played them, I said this I thought was a team that the Colts could really pick apart on the deep ball, because their safeties like to cheat the run. And we didn't really see it a ton when they played in Indianapolis, but clearly Shane and Jim Bob Cooter saw something in that game to think, okay, we can really take advantage of this when we go down to Nashville. So they came in with a game plan, obviously with like 5 minutes after we got done recording last week. It seemed like JT, the news of JT getting injured and being out for a few weeks came out. So not as huge of a production on the running game side, but yeah, the passing game with Pierce, I mean, kudos to him for really stepping up, and he did exactly what we had hoped for, which is start to catch fire on the deep ball. And I'm not overly surprised it happened against the Titans because of the way that they play their secondary. So kudos to him for sure.
Yeah, and I wanted to. There's also several other players that you can really point to that are a key cog, really, for the reason why the Colts are on this 4-game winning streak. We were buried a little bit at 3-5. We were still in the dumps a little bit about AR being out for the season. I think he had just got surgery at that point, and it was just not really a too good of a feeling as a Colts fan. But last week, when all three of us were just going back and forth between players, obviously Alec Pierce has been covered, but I know we actually spent a good amount of coverage on Kwity Paye and a few other players. I know we've talked about the secondary several weeks now, but overall the secondary held Will Levis to under 220 yards or whatever it was. I think he barely completed 50% of his passes, if that, and it's like, man, I'm really starting to see the development of these young kids. And, as I mentioned in the previous one, if they're left alone and not doing complicated coverages, they look pretty good, and they showed it again. Now, granted, there's a couple times where, some beats did happen, and that's the nature of the beast. That's the NFL. You're going to get beat one way or the other. You're not going to be perfect for 17 weeks. That's life. That's the NFL. And a crazy stat that I saw. So the fun fact, the Colts are second in the NFL in sacks at 42 sacks as a team, only trailing the Baltimore Ravens, I believe. Of those 42 sacks, 21 of them, so half of them, have come in the last 4 games, which is mind-blowing. That's over 5 sack average a game. And when you're getting to the quarterback 5 times a game and hitting him probably another 5-6 times, that's 11 of probably 60, 70 disrupted plays, which is a huge percentage. And if you stop, say, another 30-40%, whether it's no gain to 2 yards or incomplete passes, like, that is extremely effective on defense. And that's where I'll give kudos to a little bit to Gus Bradley, even though we've dogged on him a little bit. But at the same time, there is still a lot of yardage gaps that we keep giving up. There's a lot of boneheaded touchdowns that happen and play calling, and we could dive deep into that. But overall, this bend but don't break mentality is working thus far. Now, granted, we haven't played a true aerial assault team like the Cowboys or the Chiefs or anybody of that nature, but I still have a lot of confidence right now. And as you stated, with the remaining schedule, my confidence is actually really high right now.
Yeah, man. I mean, you point out a lot of interesting things, especially kind of starting with that defensive line and their, ability to come on and get a lot more sacks over the last 4 weeks or so. And that's really interesting and compelling to me because they did that all with Grover Stewart out. So that really tells you that guys like Eric Johnson, Taven Bryan, I can't remember what his first name is, Martin. Those guys are really coming in and becoming kind of a stable force there in the rotation with Grove out, and obviously we're getting him back this week against the Bengals. So I was listening to some of the other Colts official podcasts with JJ Stankovitz, and he pointed out like that's invaluable reps and experience in games, especially you're still getting the wins, but you're getting those backup guys, those first-team reps and first-team rotational reps while Grover's out, and then you can come back in and plug one of the best run-stopping defensive tackles back into your team, and then you've got all these guys that are going to be able to kind of back him up, and really we shouldn't skip too much of a beat, moving forward because they've had so much time to get that experience so far the last 6 games or so. So I think it's super interesting that our edge rush and the pressure that we're getting on the quarterbacks, like you pointed out, not exactly some of the best quarterbacks and offenses out there that we've seen, but really impressive stuff. And there's been times where I texted you a couple times Sunday in the first half, like Gus Bradley, man. I get it, the bend don't break, but I got to give them credit at least because the last 2 weeks, especially, they've come back out with a clear plan for the second half. And they've made adjustments and they've won the second half. That's all I can ask for. It's a complete role reversal of what we saw with the previous regime, where it was like we get off to a hot start and then just crumble. So I can live with the fact that this team and these coaching staff is making adjustments at halftime, that we're seeing a sharp change in play on the defensive side of the ball in the second half. So, and to give them a little bit of credit too, there was several times in that game where there were like cheeky bounces that just didn't go our way, like that interception fumble thing that Levis like recovered from Julian Blackman, and then the like mysterious fumble, but then the guy recovered it, but then they go back 13 yards. I don't know. There was a lot of weird things that happened in this game that really there could have been a lot more momentum for us on the defensive side of the ball, and things just didn't exactly fall our way. But it ended up not mattering in the end, and we pulled it out. So kudos to them for holding up in the fourth quarter and overtime early when they needed to.
Yeah. And I think in terms of a defensive test, if you look at the remaining schedule, this game on Sunday might be the last remaining test where we're facing some really good weapons. Because, yes, Joe Burrow is out, but this kid, Jake Browning, came in and just tore the Jaguars apart. I think he went like 32 of 37 and threw for like 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, mind you, any quarterback can look good with an even semi-decent offensive line, and you have weapons like Joe Mixon, you've got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and it's like, okay, cool. Imagine if Minshew had those weapons. Now, granted, I love Michael Pittman and Josh Downs and their production and our tight ends, of course, but those are elite weapons overall. And the 1-2 punch, we talked about it a little bit with Cole. Like, you think through the NFL, who's some of the best 1-2 punch wide receivers out there? Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are up there. Like, they're debatable top 5, easy. And we have Juju Brent is back this week. I believe he is going to play. So that is a massive addition to our secondary. And if he can stay on, say, T. Higgins and match up size for size, then we could have Kenny Moore shadowing Jamar or Boyd or whomever. So that gives me a little bit more confidence defensively going up against an offensive arsenal like the Bengals have. And then in terms of our offense, I know the Bengals defense is like middle of the road. I'm actually kind of expecting a higher scoring game. I'm not expecting this to be a slugfest in terms of ground and pound and clock wearing. This might be another aerial assault type of game, and I'm kind of excited about it because Minshew's showing some deep ball touch, especially against the Titans. Now, granted, as you said, their secondary is a little bit gag-worthy, if you will. And I don't know. I'm having trouble coming to terms of how this offense under Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter, how it's going to morph starting going towards the playoffs. Because still to this point, I can't find a true offensive identity with this team because the game plan changes every week based on who we're playing, what personnel is in or out, and which is good. Don't get me wrong. Like, this is not a bad thing at all because as we've pounded the dead horse over and over again, Frank Reich, you knew what we were getting over and over again, and the whole league knew it. We couldn't do anything about it. But now it's just the unpredictability is so beautiful and pristine to watch and refreshing, and I'm engaged on every offensive snap because I want to see what Shane's going to cook up. It's like, because it's been something different every week.
Yeah, man, I agree completely. I mean, I was just going to say the same thing in terms of like, I'm glad that that's how we're running our offense. Like, you find weaknesses in the other team's defense. We knew against the Buccaneers, like we said, they had a top 5 rushing defense. So what do? We go pass like the first 12 plays. Last week We knew with Moss, being in there for JT being out, don't have a lot of depth at running back. We're probably not going to be able to rely on the running game as much. So what do? We set up some of these guys with some quicker passes, and then we're taking deep shots. Just the game plan overall, and then especially like that creative play that Shane ran where Minshew threw down the sideline to Kylan Granson. I mean, we haven't seen that play all year. So it's like he's still pulling tricks out of the hat, and I really am enjoying watching this offense. It's the unpredictability is fantastic from our perspective because, in the past with Reich and even sometimes under the Pagano regime, you like see a 3rd and 5 and you're like, you just knew the Colts were going to try to run some kind of like stupid run play or some kind of like telegraph short pass. And I think with Shane, he's just such a out of the box thinker on the offensive side that you just really have no idea what he's going to do. And I think that's reflected with how the defenses are playing against us because they're playing pretty timid in terms of like trying to take away the run, especially when JT's in. So I think hopefully we can get him back, prior to the playoffs, and that'll be huge. But yeah, going into this weekend is going to be really interesting because, when Burrow went down and Browning came in, like we're talking about a guy who hadn't won a game since he was at Washington like 7 years ago. So my confidence went through the roof, and then he comes out against the Jaguars, and that their offense was just humming. So it's kind of funny to see like the betting lines swing back and forth for this game because I think the Colts they were favored for a little while, and then now after last week, I think the Bengals are like a 2-point favorite, and then the Colts are like a 2-point dog. So that's interesting to see. But I think in terms of looking at this game coming up against the Bengals, at least from a defensive perspective, I think we can avoid falling into the same trap as the Jaguars if the Colts are able to more effectively limit what I think is it Chase Martin and Joe Mixon can do. I think they ran for like 156 yards. So getting Grover back, if we can really stymie that rushing offense, that's going to put a lot more pressure on their quarterback to Jake Browning to make a play in the passing game and force the issue a little bit more. And that's where you're going to make a guy like that make mistakes. So I feel actually pretty good about this game still in terms of, what to expect out of our defense. Now I say that, and I'm sure something's going to piss me off in the first half, but that's just part of the Gus Bradley experience. So, and then from the offensive side of the ball, to your point, I haven't seen the Bengals enough to know what their weaknesses are, but I know that Shane and Jim Bob are going to find them. So I don't know what to expect out of it, but I would not be the least bit surprised if we come out and we see Zach Moss running for like 120 again, and then we're short dip and dive passes, and we're not throwing deep. Or I don't know. I really don't know what to expect at this point.
I've done a little bit of studying with the Bengals, and it seems to me, so they do have a really elite, consistent pass rusher with Trey Hendrickson. And I forget who their other end's name is, but he gets pretty good pressure too. Now, they are a true 4-3 edge rush team, so those defensive ends are going to try and get vertical real quick. Now, this is where I'm going to start digging back into the unsung heroes of the 2023 Indianapolis Colts, and that is right tackle currently Blake Freeland, somebody who you have pounded the kitchen table on most of the year in terms of all the way from when he was drafted to early in the season and even up through last week. And with Braden Smith still being banged up and probably missing more time, I think he's going to be out again this week. Blake Freeland steps in at right tackle facing Trey Hendrickson. And Freeland's athletic ability is a little bit higher than Braden Smith. And with Ryman on the left side, on the blind side, we already know his athletic ability. He's still one of the top left tackles, or I wouldn't say top, but upper echelon of left tackles right now in the NFL in terms of how he's playing. So I can very much see the offensive game plan being kick those defensive ends out, run some screens, run some power plays through, behind tackles, behind guards, take those defensive ends out of it. And then the Bengals really struggle against tight ends. So this could be a game, pending on which tight ends are active, a Will Mallory game, a Granson game, an Ogletree game. I've pretty much given up faith on Jelani Woods playing this year. But, I mean, you can even throw in Mo Alley Cox. Mo Alley Cox could finally have a game where he catches more than one pass or get more than one target, if you will. So, continuously pounding the rock, probably some quick screens, some tight end seams, and, of course, just going to the go-to horse, Michael Pittman Jr., who is now, I think, over half of his games played, he has 8 or more catches, which is just absolutely insane. But he's getting targeted 12, 14 times a game. He's the go-to guy, and he's the exact type of receiver you want to have a go-to.
He had one last week where I was like, physically, I don't even understand how he made the catch. I mean, it was like such a tight window. It was a crazy throw by Minshew, but it was such a tight window, and he caught it kind of behind him when the defender was right on top of him, and it was for a critical first down. And yeah, I mean, that guy has been playing out of his mind. I mean, they always say people in their contract year. Well, I mean, I tell you what, he's not leaving any doubt about what he deserves to get from the Colts this offseason.
Oh, if I fully expect a $20 million a year contract for Pittman. He deserves it. He's, for the last several years, 2-3 years, he's just made critical first down reception after first down reception. And he is tough as nails. We saw it in the Baltimore game when he got his head decapitated and his helmet flew off, and he still caught that jump ball right over a defender's head. I'm trying to remember who it was, but he just completely mossed the guy.
And you can't ask for a better culture guy. I mean, he's the type of guy that Ballard has sung his praises for years now, but he's the type of guy that Shane's going to lean on to really make sure that they're building that winning culture. Like, Pittman hates losing, hates it. He's made it very well known. He was extremely upset last year, all throughout the season, and he was still playing as hard as he possibly could. So, he's the kind of guy that you want on your team to build as a building block for the future, to teach those younger guys. He's quickly becoming a veteran, even though it seems like he's only been here 2 or 3 years. I mean, he's quickly becoming a veteran on this team, and he's the kind of guy that you want to really have around to help change that culture and teach these younger guys the winning ways. So,
and that's the crazy thing. He's only in his 4th season, and he's already the veteran in the room. He's the elder statesman in the room. And, one last touch on his toughness and his just overall mindset of just to win. I remember his dad, Michael Pittman Sr., he was a running back for the Buccaneers for a couple of years back when they were a powerhouse in the early mid-2000s. And I remember watching Pittman, Michael Pittman Sr. run the football, and he was just as hard-nosed, if not even harder. Like, he just lowered his shoulder pads, would throw his helmet into your chest and drive right through you. And that's the same mentality that Pittman has. And I know we've talked about his skill set and how he's not our opinion is he's not a true number one, but he's got that number one alpha dog mentality.
Mm. No, I agree. I mean, it's, what, we can say what we want about 1, 2, wide receiver 1, 2, 3, whatever. I'll give Shane this. I mean, he came in with basically, he was involved, in the draft of Downs, but beyond that, you're talking about 2 guys that he inherited from a previous regime. And the patchwork that he's done of figuring out what people's strengths are and how to put them on the field together. I mean, the last 5 weeks, it's worked. You know what I mean? So it's whatever. I don't know at this point. I still don't think Pittman is the guy. We don't have a Jamar Chase or a DeAndre Hopkins, but he's doing enough. When you have 10 catches and 120 yards every game and a touchdown, what else can you ask out of a guy? So I think we are getting the full potential out of this offense right now, and I'm really just excited. It makes me more excited for the future because if they can add another piece, whether it be the draft or free agency or whatever, on that offensive, in the wide receiver room, it's going to make it really compelling, especially getting back AR next year. I mean, there's a lot to like about the future, but we're even seeing a lot of that kind of crest in front of our eyes this year, and we've all of a sudden turned into a potential playoff team that I think it's like we always share the big cat power rankings from Barstool every week to each other. It's like slowly we're just climbing up. Now we're in like the could make playoffs and win a game category. It's like kind of a high rise from like bad but frisky where we started off this year.
Yeah, we did start off in like the bad and frisky category, and then for the longest time we were in the frisky and fun category. Just could not leave there. It was like we were forgotten about. But yeah, now it's frisky and fun. Could win a playoff game, and they are. The Colts are a fun team to watch. I really do enjoy watching it every week. And I'll tell you what the most fun was is I don't know if you got this, if you saw this. I think I did send it to you. The Colts love to share sound bites and mic'd up moments every week. And it was the Buccaneers game when they had Shane mic'd up, Shane Steichen. And after that, the Phillip Rivers comments and comparisons just came pouring in. Because, I mean, if you remember Uncle Phil on the sideline, he was like, oh, golly, here we go. Dadgummit. I mean, Shane was doing that the entire game, and there was a leg kick motion that he did that's exactly like what Phil used to do. And I'm laughing hysterically watching this. And then today, the Colts publish a side-by-side video of him in that game and then Phil from the 2020 COVID season, and the exact same mannerisms and vocabulary and just how they speak on the football field was absolutely hilarious. And I think their caption was something along the lines of, we missed Uncle Phil so much on the sideline, we just had to get him in coach form.
Yeah, I did not see that, but that's hilarious. Now, you're exactly right. And I'm sure there's some of that is him knowing he's mic'd up, but he had a lot of shoots and dadgummits. I don't know that that's usually what's coming out of his mouth on the sideline, but yeah, that was a really good clip. And it just shows you, like, I love having a coach with passion like that. I mean, no disrespect to our previous two head coaches, but they were not showing that kind of outward like excitement and like trying to get the guys fired up in that regard. They were more stoic and like business like.
That's our last four: Dungy,
Yeah.
Caldwell, Pagano, and Reich.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice, refreshing, perspective to have. And how excited he gets about the fan bases. I mean, I've seen him make comments about our fan base, like how awesome our fans are on the road. I think he's just really enjoying learning how to be a head coach, but also becoming a part of the Colts organization and the community. I think it's cool to see it all coming together, and I can't wait for it to continue with some of our young guys like Anthony Richardson and everything too.
Yep, that's for sure. So we've hit a lot of offense and some defense. I want to, before we kind of get into game score predictions and whatnot, I want to really give a shout out to our special teams, especially against the special teams won the game, in my opinion, against the Titans. And when we lost Bubba Ventrone to Cleveland, as he's, I believe, still there. He's their special team coordinator and assistant head coach is his title over there. When we lost Bubba, I think you and I chatted quite a bit about there goes the special teams aces that the Colts for several years in a row were known for. Because you could almost count on the fact that the Colts were either going to get a couple punt block touchdowns, we were going to get maybe a kick return touchdown, or just like some wacky special teams fake or something that Bubba had cooked up in the lab and brought onto the field randomly. But this past game, there was the first time was we almost got a kick block. And it was on that right side of the Tennessee line that we pushed through, and I just audibly went, "Ooh, so close!" And then the next punt that Tennessee had, I saw them overload that side, and they just destroyed that side, broke through, blocked the punt, touchdown, and I lost my mind. And then I think that's when I texted both you and Cole, and I was like, "Who needs Bubba?" or who misses Bubba? And then the next punt, we go and excuse me, Stonehouse, I think was the poor punter's name. Tony Brown shoots in off of the gunner position and just runs straight into the kicker's leg before he even had a chance to like catch the ball and bring it up to punt. And I unfortunately I think Stonehouse got a completely destroyed leg, which I wish him the best. Hope he recovers well. But that was almost three straight special teams plays where we completely changed the narrative and the momentum feel of that game.
Well, and it's so taking it a step back. I remember on our last episode, I remember you talking about how we almost blocked a punt against the Buccaneers. So it's clear that they're starting to figure something out. And it was interesting to me because if I remember right, against the Titans, when they overloaded on the first block punt, it was on the far side, and then on the second one, it was Tony Brown came off the near side and blocked it from that direction. So it's like it wasn't like they just picked on one spot. I mean, they clearly had a scheme that they felt they could take advantage of. And all the credit to Brian Mason. I mean, he's our new special teams coordinator, and I recall him. I think he won like special teams coordinator of the year when he was at Notre Dame prior to coming to the Colts because they had like 7 or 8 block punts there. So, clearly he knows what he's doing and how to scheme for that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the special teams won us the game in that regard. Like we scored the touchdown. Grant Stewart scored the touchdown off that block punt. But also unfortunate for Ryan Stonehouse getting injured, but that chain reaction of events led to Ryan Tannehill having to be the holder, and he screwed up the hold and
laces out Dan.
Yeah, what's his? I can't remember what their kicker's name is, but he missed the extra point, and I think we're talking about a whole different game. If it's what was it? It would have been like 26.
It would have been a tie game, I think, at 28.
No, they would have been up a point if they would.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I think that was all. That was a huge change of momentum as well. So yeah, that was a fantastic special teams day. And it really was great to see. Like I said earlier, that was kind of the spark we needed because the first half was pretty ugly from our perspective. I mean, we had that awesome pass to Pierce, but other than that, it was a whole lot of Tennessee just kind of doing whatever they wanted and marching down the field. So, which is kind of what we saw when they played in Indy as well. But yeah, it was an impressive day from special teams for sure.
Very enjoyable to watch, and I'm glad that what really that set the tone, or pretty much locked in stone for me, was that we really can. Speaking as the 2023 Colts, they really can execute in all 3 phases and make an impact of the game, which I'm so sick of hearing the all 3 phases part of the game because that was just
Frank Reich PTSD.
That would I know. I'm going to limit that here real quick because that was just it was every press conference, it was every after a game interview. Oh, we didn't execute in all 3 phases. Oh, this is what it looks like executing all 3 phases. Just done with it.
Yeah. No, but it's true. I mean, that's literally what we're seeing. I think it's, the only way to win in the NFL is to get everybody on the same page. And it's very clear. It was clear 6 weeks ago, but especially after the bye week, that this team is really humming on all cylinders.
Hopefully we can keep that momentum going for the next several weeks.
There's no excuse that this team – I mean, I could understand, dropping one to the Texans. In my opinion, I don't think there's any excuse for us to lose more than maybe 1 out of the next 4. I personally think I kind of disagree in terms of what I think is the most difficult game remaining. I think the Texans is the most difficult game. No, it's at home.
I wasn't mainly in terms of difficulty. I'm talking in terms of like just skill set position players
Gotcha.
outside of quarterback.
But I mean, yeah, I mean it's still a great point because they obviously came out and held their own and won against the Jags. But I mean, this schedule is the Colts really. This might be me putting the cart before the horse, but from what I've seen out of them the last few weeks, if they can continue to play that way and limit their own turnovers and things like that, I mean, I think it's every bit reasonable to think they could go, 4 for 5 here to end the season.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't disagree with that. At absolute worst, 3-2, and I mean at absolute worst.
I think we're if we see a loss to depending on how it all shakes out with the quarterbacks, but if we see a loss to a Trubisky Steelers team at home, I mean
That's
that's
unacceptable.
that's unconscionable. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't I would not be I would be upset, but I would not be super like down on the team if they ended up losing against the Bengals this week. I really think it's a game they should win. But I mean, as you can see, Vegas thinks the Bengals have got the juice right now. So,
Yeah, I
um,
mean they're 2.5 favorites right now, the way
but
it
some of these
stands.
other games, the way that the Falcons quarterback carousel and how they're playing, and the Raiders, debacle with their coaching staff changes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's really just no excuse for any more than, in my opinion, like maybe one loss. I guess I could agree with you. Maybe like a floor of 2 losses, but beyond that, it's really gone off the rails somehow. But one thing I wanted to say here, and a couple weeks ago we mentioned that the coach of the year race with why is his name escaping me from the Texans?
D'Amico Ryans.
D'Amico Ryans. I don't know that it's so clear cut anymore. I mean, I
I,
think what Steichen has done here with a backup quarterback, I get it. The cupboard was pretty bare when D'Amico came in. They're bringing in a rookie quarterback with Stroud, and he's put up a lot of numbers. But the way that this team is humming right now with Gardner Minshew and not having Jonathan Taylor for half the season and not having Grover Stewart for half the season and all the injuries that we've endured on the defensive side of the ball, I think he should be every bit under consideration as D'Amico Ryans for Coach of the Year.
you're not going to get any argument from me. Zero, zilch, nada.
Especially when you look at what this team came from last year with largely a
Largely
lot
the
of
same
the
roster.
same roster. Yeah, I mean there's not a lot of turnover other than rookies and a couple of small free agent signings and changing up our kicker. But I
The kicking game is underratedly a reason why we're also winning and staying in games.
oh, I agree. I agree
Like,
completely. But I think it's a testament to the culture shift and the mentality that this team has undertaken in just a short 13 weeks.
speaking of culture shift, you kind of sparked a thought in my head. So there were some interesting comments that both Zaire Franklin has said, and I think Pittman has said a few things. Maybe Taylor has. It just quite a few of the Colts veterans and leaders have. Is they were asked why it's been so much different this year, and why is Coach Steichen so much different and more not more enjoyable, but easy to play for, and enjoy and good to play for. And the word that came out of every single one of their mouths was accountability. And they're just saying, it's not just it's the standard that he sets and enforces by example, and making sure that everybody, whether it's coaching staff, trainers, players, everybody that has something to do with that organization being ready for game day, the standard is set and it is held to. Now, that immediately screams to me multiple things. One, going back to last year, clearly there was no accountability. Zero zilch, like nothing, which is why Jim pulled the trigger, got rid of Frank, brought Saturday in. Jeff Saturday, Mr. ESPN personality, but all-time great Colt, right? Saturday brings in that mentality of the Peyton Manning era where it was nothing but Peyton holding the team accountable, and everybody just had a standard of excellence to follow, or you got your ass chewed, excuse my French. That clearly was lacking. Saturday comes in, only wins a game, right? We know that story. But he brought a sense of accountability and a sense of urgency. With Steichen, clearly that tone needed to be kept. And the real key cog or key release, if you will, was Shaq Leonard being let go. And I don't think that was based on just skill set alone. There's not any public documentation out there. There's no press conference, interview, nothing out there saying this. I'm just going off a gut feeling alone. It almost seems like there may have been an accountability issue with Shaq. And I may be speaking completely incorrectly here. I'm going off of just gut feeling alone. There just seems to be that there was something that was not there with him.
Well, and you look at it, and it's from that perspective, like, even if there wasn't necessarily a outward like problem with accountability with Shaq, the signal that you give to the rest of your team is, hey, you got to play for your spot every practice, every week, every game. It doesn't matter how good you are, how good you've been in the past, how long you've been here, how much money you make. You have to play your butt off every week if you're going to be on my team. And that's the level of accountability that Shane sets with that move. And anybody with eyeballs could see that Shaq was not contributing what he has in the past. And frankly, he was becoming somewhat of a distraction with how he was complaining about his use, coupled with the fact that EJ Speed has been playing his butt off all year and been awesome. So I think with that move, I don't know how much it went into it with Shane versus Chris in deciding that, but either way, it was a change in the mindset of like, hey, doesn't matter who you are, you got to earn your spot every week. So I agree with that completely. And I mean, I remember McAfee alluded to some of that, like, hearing that the locker room was basically a disaster under Reich, and that's why the ship sank, basically. So I think, with top end players like Jonathan Taylor, he was one of the guys that McAfee called out, and I think it's a learning experience for him. He's still a young guy. He's still got room to grow and learn how to be a better, more vocal leader. But then you've got a guy like Anthony Richardson who's clearly got a square head on his shoulders. He knows exactly what he's there to do. It's all business with him, and he knows how to be a leader. So I think with guys like him and Pittman, that level of accountability, nothing but respect for Shaq, but it clearly wasn't working anymore. And Shane and Chris, whoever really made the decision there, made the right call in terms of setting the tone for how they want their players to play and how they want their team to be run.
Yep. And thank you for bringing up AR, because I want to say this and put it out there, another opinion of mine. And this, I'm going to make kind of a different comparison here. So there's a lot of skepticism out there of folks of like, AR Richardson needs this playing time. Him missing this season is just basically going to make him a rookie going into next year. Well, I'm going to rebuttal that. Patrick Mahomes, coming out of Texas Tech, was clearly talented. Was rough around the edges. I watched him in college several times. I went to Lubbock, Texas, and watched several Texas Tech games when Mahomes was there. The talent was oozing out of him, but you could tell that there was so much rough and rawness around him. He gets drafted number 10 overall to the Kansas City Chiefs that year, and he sits an entire season behind Alex Smith under the tutelage of Andy Reid, one of the greatest offensive minds this league has ever seen. And he watches, he learns, he asks questions, he does all the right things. He holds himself to the highest of standards. Like Richardson, square head on his shoulders, coachable, great character, everything. And now, with Richardson out, he did get some playing time. He is sitting behind a consummate professional in Gardner Minshew, and clearly there is a square-shouldered, square-headed offensive guru in Shane Steichen, who is a clear leader of men as well. I personally think that we are going to see a much more refined Anthony Richardson next year. Once he is healthy, a full offseason is under his belt, and unfortunately, as we've discussed, Gardner Minshew is probably moving on. And if he doesn't and he stays here, bless up to Minshew. But I personally think Anthony Richardson could, I'm not going to guarantee anything, it's a dangerous game. I personally think Richardson could come back next year, and the ceiling is lighting the league on fire. The floor is keeping us right where we're at, in my opinion.
I don't disagree at all because, I mean, the way you look at it is he's on the sideline every game with an earpiece in, listening exactly to what the calls are between Shane and Gardner. And, you know, he's got all this time to really take a step back and focus in on what the offense is doing during the week to prepare. He's not having to learn on the fly like he was in the first 4 weeks. He can kind of be that fly on the wall, just absorb information. I expect by the time next season rolls around, he's going to know Shane Steichen's offense like the back of his hand. And he's going to have that ability to, you know, do you want the reps in practice and game? Obviously. But we know his talent is there. It was more about getting his ability to translate to the NFL and getting him comfortable passing the ball. And I think, you know, having an entire season to kind of be in the background with Jim Bob, with Shane, just learning from those guys, I mean, it's invaluable experience. And I think it's very clear to us that the physical tools are there, and this is where we get the mental side right.
For sure. I'm so excited about it already. I'm thrilled about the continuation and the conclusion of this season. Don't get me wrong, but I'm still already looking forward to next year, man. I can't get enough. But game this Sunday, 2 days from now. What's kind of your thoughts? I mean, I'm looking at the line, 2.5 Bengals favorites. I think I'm looking for it. The over-under is 43.5. So Vegas is expecting, call it a 23-20 type of game, 24-21 type of game. I could see it definitely being a lot higher than that. I do have the Colts pulling this out. Ultimately, this is where it's so hard to struggle because I don't know if we're going to get the Jake Browning that lit the Jaguars on, like, just torch the ever-loving bejesus out of their secondary, or is this going to be the kid that couldn't win a football game for 7 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, though. I mean, I think so. I echo those sentiments of being interested to see what version of the Bengals shows up this week and what version of Jake Browning. I call back to what I said earlier. I think it's really going to depend on if we can completely shut down Mixon in their run game and Chase Brown. I think that's going to be super huge for setting the tone of how this game goes and putting more pressure on Browning, because as we've seen, as you mentioned earlier, our pass rush has been extremely effective the last 3 or 4 weeks. So if we can continue all that while shutting down the run, I think it'll be huge. But I have the Colts winning here. I do think it probably goes over. I don't know, though, that – I mean, I think – I don't know if I'm just being a homer at this point. I like the Colts like 28-20. I think we go over, and I think we beat them by more than a possession.
Yeah, and I'm kind of leaning that way as well. And while I talk here, do your little you find our referees for us. That's your go-to. And our broadcasting team. We need that critical information for Sunday. Huge, if you will. I'm going to kind of echo the same sentiments. I'm definitely going to hit the over on this, and with the way the offense looks, I have to give the Colts at least 28 points or more, like you. But I'm going to go Colts 34, Bengals 24.
I like it.
Because I'm with you. With Grover Stewart and anchoring down the middle of the line, we're giving up, I think, not even 85 yards rushing the game. Without him, it's been like 140, 145. So that's a huge difference, and I think Grover is going to make a huge impact. Kwity Paye is starting to step up his pass rush. Cole Towner is no longer allowed to dog Kwity Paye unless he's proven otherwise. He's also not allowed. Well, we are not allowed to talk about Colts running backs anymore because A, Taylor gets hurt, and B, Zach Moss forgets how to run the football. So Colts running backs are officially barred until further notice in terms of talking about but yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking about with this game in terms of how to win it. I already said a little bit earlier some power running, maybe some quick screens, tight end seams, a lot of tight end work. Maybe we start seeing a couple of bootlegs and a lot of RPO play action game, which, I mean, that's a staple for Shane Steichen anyway. So Colts 34, Bengals 24. That's my pick.
I like it. I like the call. So it looks like we've got the Sean Hockley crew. And in terms of
I think we had them for the Ravens game.
Yeah, I can't find my usual setup to where I can see. He's only been a head ref for a few years, so I don't know that we have a huge sample size with him. But
I miss Ed.
Yeah.
Hockley.
Ed Hockley.
That dude is still probably yoked out of his mind.
And then our announcer crew is Tom McCarthy, James Lofton, Jay Feely, and Tiffany Blackman. So
I think that's CBS, one of CBS's like B crews. Or
yeah,
maybe
I have no opinion there because I can't say that I remember them calling one of our games.
No, I remember. I know that crew. That's one of their upper echelon 1 o'clock window game crews.
Did they do the? I feel like
we haven't had him this year.
Feely. I think we did have Jay. Maybe he was with a different crew. I remember Jay Feely for one of the games earlier this year. I thought it was the Patriots game.
We've been dogged with like the number 4 or 5 crew from both CBS and Fox for this entire season, and I think the networks are now realizing like, hey, this team's actually fun to watch and decent. We're going to go watch them instead of the Buffalo Bills fumble all over themselves again.
Yeah. No, I like that. I really have enjoyed the Spiro Didis and Adam Archuleta crew, but
that is a good one.
I'll roll with this one and see how it goes. I can't say that I know a whole lot about them or recall anything like I had some of the other crews that really chapped my ass, so to speak.
I'm just glad I've yet to hear Chris Collinsworth on a Colts game. Like that's just music, honestly.
Now here's a guy. A little quick tidbit here. IU basketball played on Peacock the other night, and Collinsworth's kid called the game on Peacock, and he sounds exactly like him. So
I know it.
Imagine watching a 2-hour basketball game where he doesn't stop talking the entire time. It was awful.
I'm good. No thanks.
But no, man, I'm excited. I think this is. I mean, we're looking at the next 2 weeks in a row, our direct competition for these wild card spots. So, if we can get some help, I don't know what Lawrence's situation is, and I'm not rooting for injury or anything, but whatever happens with the Jags, I mean, there's a lot of football to be played here and a lot to be decided, not only in the division but in the wild card. And
it sounds like he's going to play.
Is he?
He's not moving around too well, but it sounds like he's going to play.
But not playing totally healthy, who knows how that all is going to go. And
crucial matchup: Jaguars visit the Browns.
I haven't looked into the actual like matchup outcome and how that all works towards the playoffs and everything like that. But I would say I feel pretty comfortable saying I feel like the Colts pretty much control their own destiny here between playing the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Texans. I mean,
Yep.
if you can beat those teams, then I don't know how. I don't see a world where they can't get in if they beat all those teams.
Yeah, I actually, based off of what I'm looking at, this is a favorable weekend for Colts moving up in positioning. So if we can take care of business against the Bengals, we've got Jags at Browns. Browns have the best defense in the NFL, so the Jags may drop one. Keyword may. And if they do, that puts us in a tie for first place in the division. But Jags hold the tiebreaker because they beat us twice.
Well, that's kind of a tricky one because the Browns beat us and they're direct competition for the wild
wild
card.
card. But the Browns are one seat ahead of us in terms of wild.
But I mean, hell, I'll take the division if we can somehow get that. I mean, whatever. Like
that's a home playoff game if we get the division.
Yep, that'd be something we haven't seen in what?
It's been a minute.
Years.
Yeah, well, yeah, because we didn't have it in 2018 because we went to Buffalo. Or no, not 18, 2020 with Phil Rivers.
That was
2018 was the last one because I think we won against the Texans.
Was that at home? I thought that was on the road.
No, 2018 was the wild card round. We beat the Texans because remember we had to win against the Titans in the last game of the season to secure our division title. Then we hosted the Texans for the wild card round, beat them, and then went to Kansas City in the divisional round. Either way, back to current day NFL. Texans are actually visiting the Jets, and that to me sounds like a trap game.
Yeah, no, that was at the Texans. I mean, whatever. I just looked it up. I'm pretty sure it was like 2014 was the last time we hosted a playoff game.
That's gross.
It was against the Chiefs when we came back and beat them in that crazy game. I'm pretty sure that's the last.
That's the greatest game I've ever watched.
Yeah. So we're due for one. Almost 10 years.
We are due. Yeah. Bills at Chiefs, Broncos at Chargers. This could be a very good weekend for us in terms of positioning. We got to take care of business, though.
I was going to say, just win, baby. That's all we got to worry about.
Just win, baby.
Worry about ourselves, and we'll go from there.
Yep, 100% agree. 100% agree. All right, JB. We got it in. Let's keep this streak going.
I know. I for the listeners out there, I texted Blake earlier today. I'm like, we got to get this in this week because we got to keep this streak going. Every time we get a new episode out, we keep this win streak going.
So here it is on late Friday night. All right. Well, that's going to do it here for Undertaking the Colts, hosted from Undertaking the Podcast. Thank you all for listening. Please go give our X page at UTC_pod a follow, and you can see all of our interactions there. We will repost a lot of game highlights, a lot of fun content from other Colts creators, from the Colts site themselves, and that is where we'll share Apple Podcast links, YouTube links to listen to our podcast. If you do not have any direct means of listening, go follow us there. But once again, Blake Waters with JB. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it more than you'll know. Enjoy the game. We'll catch you in the next one.